Welcome to the National Stadium in Kingston, Jamaica, home of the new black, green and gold track. I'm David Riley, Deputy Chairman of the JAAA Competitions Commission, and today I'm going to take you through the new markings on the track. So this video will be for athletes and coaches and spectators to be familiar with the markings so that they can understand how to operate on this track within the rules of the competition and do so successfully. This is going to be very interesting. Let's start at the finish line. Come with me. Interestingly, our tour of the track starts at the finish line, and that's because this is one of two finish lines that the track now has. This one in particular, we've normally, on the previous track, there was a second line here before the finish line, just in front of the numerals. That line has been removed because there were sometimes athletes would lean or dip at the wrong line. So that line has been removed, so now there's only one line for athletes to be certain as to where they need to finish or what's the end of the race. Now, interestingly about the finish line, the distances are measured from the back of the line, and that's why the starter always tells you to put your fingers behind the line. So distances are measured from the back of the line all the way around for 400 meters to end at the back of the line. So the numerals or the finish line are quite big and bold for persons to see what lane they're in, and of course the dotted black lines have been added for the photo finish. So this is the finish line. Let's take you to the start line of the 100 meters, where there's some interesting things happening right there on this new track. So on the straightaway, the track has been marked for 60 meters, 70 meters, 80 meters, 100 meters, and the 110 meters for hurdles for men and under 20 boys. So the interesting thing about this area of the track is that it's an area where straight lines meet curved lines. And this is an area where there's quite a bit of confusion for some of the athletes who are trying to run the 100 meters. Sometimes they tend to run the curve because they were unable to see the straight. So the previous track had dotted or broken lines to guide them along the straight, and that seemed to have not been sufficient. What we've done on this track is we've added a solid line to provide that guidance to the athletes. Hopefully they'll be able to see the straight. So we're at the 100-meter start line. Set, go! Hopefully they'll run straight and not veer off into the next lane and impede the other athlete and get disqualified. We're in a 200-meter area, and this is an area where many lines cross. So we have the line for the steeplechase. Of course, the water jump is on the outside of the track. And so this line, we've added a solid line instead of the broken line. It's a solid line to help guide the athletes. Of course, the officials will put the cones on the line, but now we have a solid line for the steeplechase event. In this area as well, you have the 200-meter start lines for the various lanes are large numerals for the lanes for persons to be able to see from far which lane the athlete is in. This area, interestingly, also have the second finish line. We've added a second finish line on this track, and that finish line will be for the 100 meters that we will run on this side of the track, as well as the 200-meter events. We could run 100 and 200 meters in the reverse direction to allow for athletes to benefit from the wind conditions that exist in the stadium most of the day. So we know that the wind blows from the sea to the hills from about 10 o'clock in the morning till about 5 p.m. This will allow for us to run events on this side of the track and still get favorable results in this beautiful stadium here in Kingston. This is the second finish line that we talked about that will allow for races to run in this direction, and this finish line is on the backstretch side or the bleachers side of the track to allow for us to run the races with favorable wind conditions. So this finish line will be for the 100 meters and for 200 meters sprint events. Here, it's one of the new features on this track here in Kingston. So as I mentioned to you, the 100 meters can be run on this side of the track as well. But we're only running 7 lanes because lane 8 is pretty much, we can't get a straight with lane 8. On this side of the track, it's the only start line on our track that has a black line. So it's a black line, and I had to do the black line because it coincides with the start line of the 1500 meters. And so again, to minimize the confusions with the officials and athletes, the 100-meter start line on this side is in black and not the traditional white for all the start lines. Of course, every 100 meters on the track has a white line on this side of the track. At 300 meters, it's a short white line, but it's still 300 meter start line for events that will run 300 meters, or for athletes who are running to be able to know where 100 meters is on the track. So we're now at the start line of the 400 meters, which is also the same start line for the 400 meter relay, which is the 4x100 meter race. And at the start line of the 400 meters, the large numerals have been added to the lane to give a clear indication as which lane the athlete is in. These weren't there before, so these are new additions that should help with officiating, as well as help the spectators in knowing which lane exactly is the athlete in. So we don't need to use lane markers anymore because the lanes are already marked. And in this era, of course, all the relay exchange zones are there, so we'll talk some more about the relays. But here we've added the 4x200 meter 4-turn stagger marks. Of course, the staggers are very far, but this will allow for athletes to run in the same lane for the entire 800 meters of that race. So that's an interesting addition. Of course, the exchange zones are marked by the red hooks. This is the end of the exchange zone for the third leg of the 4x2. And of course, the start of that box is all the way there at the back, 30 meters of it for the exchange zones for the 4x100 meters and the 4x200 meters. In this era, the 4x400 meter relay, of course, the end of the zones, the zone is marked by the blue hooks on this track. And this is the end of the zone for the 4x4. For the second leg, of course, the start of the zone is the blue hooks to 20 meters from the end of the zone here. And that's the same thing for the 4x4, third leg, and anchor leg. The zone ends here. This is the end of the zone for the third leg and the anchor leg. This line here is the end of the zone for the 4x4, for the third leg and the anchor leg. So the zones for the 4x4 are now in light blue on this track as opposed to the color that was on the previous track. So that's it for the 4x4 and the 4x2. We'll talk about the 4x1 because that's now interesting. We've now had colored zones for the 4x100 meter relays, and those zones are in gold. So now we have gold exchange zones for the first exchange, which is the first leg to the second leg, the second exchange, which is the second leg to the third leg, and the third exchange, which is the third leg to the anchor leg. Those zones are now gold, and that's what we're going to talk about right now. 30-meter relay zone. Gold, that's a color, and athletes will be able to know clearly where the zone starts and where it ends. The worst thing you want to see in a relay is a yellow flag. The athlete must pass the baton within the zone in order for the performance to be legitimate. But of course, it's not the position of the athlete in the zone that determines whether the athlete has violated the rules, but it's the position of the baton. Once the baton is in the zone, even though the athlete is outside the zone, that performance is not a disqualification. So the track, we know it's in green, the exchange zones are gold, and the apron for the high jump and the pole vault are in black. Of course, there's a gold section of the apron, which is a javelin runway, and javelin is also on the other side, so you can throw javelin with a tailwind or with a headwind. So the high jump apron is in black, and it's about 2 degrees higher than the temperature on the green track. But that's how it is. Let's take you over to the long jump and then over to the pole vault area. So we're over on the long jump runway, and here the long jump runway has been painted in gold, bordered by the white lines. Of course, athletes must place their tape marks outside the white line and not on the line. So the athletes will vie for gold on the gold runway. Let's go. All right, so over on the pole vault runway, and the pole vault runway has been painted in gold. There are 2 such runways on either side. The addition to this area is that they've added a zero line to allow for the standard to move from 0 to 80 centimeters. The athletes are allowed to make that adjustment. And then they've also added the meter and half meter marks, starting from 2.5 meters all the way to 18 meters. So coaches will be able to stay from in the coaching area and see the takeoff points for the athletes and make the judgment as to whether they're on inside or outside of their takeoff points. This is a good addition for coaches and athletes in this area for the pole vault. It should be very interesting how these modifications to the track will help the athletes in the competition, and hopefully these additions will make great competition. It's been my pleasure taking you through the new markings on the track. We're looking forward to you at the next competition right here in Kingston, the sprint capital of the world.